But you may have checked the box that says, I have green screen.
Yeah. Oh, I shouldn't do that because you get all the green.
Correct.
You know what? I need that because I was just asked to sing the national anthem for the district meeting for DAR. So I should have a cool background, shouldn't I?
Yes.
Maybe Fort McHenry. That'd be cool.
I'm looking for people to participate in the Memorial Day service. Would you be interested in singing the national anthem for that?
Where is it at?
It'll be on Zoom, so you can record it ahead of time.
No, I don't. I would love to sing it. This is going to be my first attempt. So let me let you know, okay? How it
Okay,
works.
all right.
My first attempt at Zoom singing, so I'm not sure.
Well, like I said, we can record it beforehand, and then just play the video
Oh,
during the meeting or during the observation.
how would I get together for a video?
We've got over a month, so we can talk about that later on.
Okay.
But yeah, but it'd just be getting together, finding a spot with good acoustics, doing the video, and then once we have the video, then we have it.
Well, I'm just overwhelmed. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's sweet. Oh, okay, you guys have made my day. Thank you.
Charlie Frye, you're muted.
Bernie?
Yes, sorry, I was finding that my headphones were not functioning, so I'm now going live with my laptop in front of me.
Who was that just speaking?
Charlie Frye.
Charlie Frye, okay. Is Charlie a member of the San Diego SAR? I don't recognize the name, some reason I'm asking.
A member of the Redlands chapter.
You what?
I'm a member. Yeah, sorry. I'm a member of the Redlands chapter.
Okay, Charlie, thank you.
I think he's the featured speaker today.
Oh, okay. I didn't get a program, so I'm kind of in the dark here a little bit.
Charlie, I bought your last book.
Oh, thank you.
Can everyone hear me?
You're a little bit light.
Okay, I'm gonna change speakers here. Microphones. How's that? Any better?
Oh, much better.
All right.
Much better.
Yeah, Bob, we're recording this meeting, so you'll be able to replay it and get everything for the minutes if you want.
Okay, thank you. Big help. That's a big help.
Yeah, I can imagine. Welcome, Charlie.
Thank you.
We'll get started in a couple of minutes here, folks. Okay. Should sound. Well.
Barry,
Yes, sir.
would you send me the background that you've got?
Sure.
You know where I live.
Okay.
That's my grandson playing beach volleyball.
Oh, yeah?
Great picture, Dick. That's a great picture.
Yep. I think our daughter took it.
Really good. It's really good. I take a bike ride around the bay 3 times a week. I go 10 miles and so many volleyball courts out on the beach. It's just wonderful to see all those kids playing.
Well, he's gotten a scholarship to go to Juniata in Pennsylvania,
Wow.
Division III volleyball.
My son is a volleyball teacher up in the Orange County area, up near Long Beach.
Well, that's a hotbed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our son played at University High School in Irvine and went to UCLA on a volleyball scholarship.
Really? Wow.
Al Skates was still there.
Okay, folks, it's the top of the hour. Shall we get started?
Yep.
All right, great. Can all see the presentation screen?
We can.
All right, great. I call this meeting of the San Diego chapter of the Sons of the American Revolution to order. Would you please stand? Since Reverend DeLong isn't with us today, I will lead us in the invocation. Almighty God, please ask your blessing on this chapter of the Sons of the American Revolution, as our purpose is to promote sound learning and true patriotism and to further all that is good in our community. So we pray that you will strengthen our hands in all that we undertake, that we may serve our nation to your honor and glory. Amen.
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 Color Guard, would you please advance the colors?
Color Guard, attend hut, present colors, forward, march. Mark time, march. Color Guard, halt. Left, base. Present colors.
Patriot Newton, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United
of the
States.
United
States of
States of
America,
America and to
and
the
to the
republic
republic
for which
for
it
which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation
nation under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty and justice
justice
for
for
all.
all.
Color Guard, please post the colors.
Attend hut. About base. Post the colors. Attend hut.
Patriot Fagan, would you please lead us in the singing of God Bless America?
Yes.
Thank you.
God bless
America,
and that I love, stand beside her and guide
her
through the night with the light
with the
from
breath from
above,
above,
from the
the
mountain
mountain
to the
the
prairie,
prairie,
to the
to the
ocean,
ocean,
white with
white with foam. God bless America.
My home,
Home,
sweet
sweet
home.
home.
God bless America.
God
My home,
bless
sweet
America.
home.
Sweet home.
Thank you. Patriot Hinshaw, may I ask you to lead us in the pledge to the SAR?
We descendants of the heroes of the American Revolution, who by their sacrifices established the United States of America, reaffirm our faith in the principles of liberty and our constitutional republic, and solemnly pledge ourselves to defend them against every foe.
Thank you. May I ask you to lead us in the pledge to the SAR? Color Guard Commander, please retire the guard.
Ready, two, right, face, forward, march. Color guard, halt, to your post.
Thank you. Please be seated. Hang on. Before we get started, I'd like to welcome some honored guests. First, we have Paula Jo Cahoon. Paula Jo, it's great to see you. I met Paula Jo last year on, I believe it was December 17th.
I believe so. The
It
reason
was one of the, yeah, it was one of the 2 days we were allowed to place wreaths at Miramar. And I just happened to run into her, and I heard a lot about her from a lot of our elder statesmen, and it was a pleasure to finally meet her. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for asking me. This is such an honor. I'm so happy to see the sons this morning.
Thank you. We also have with us Judy Brooks, who is the Red, White, and Blue SAR chapter director. Judy, would you like to say a few words, please?
Am I on all right?
You are on great.
Oh, good. I'm not too sure about using this iPad. It is great to join with all of you sons. And I just wanted to give you a little report on our society. We are hoping and planning on having an in-person meeting on the 16th of May and celebrating the actually the 125th birthday of the SAR, and doing our annual meeting to cover 2 meetings with a lot of awards. We're hoping to have your color guard, but I can understand if you have a big problem on the 15th, you have a big project to do, and we can catch you another time. I do have, well, we have 26 members, but of that 26, I'm lucky if I have 9 kids actually being active at the time. And I do have some young men, early teens, and I think one of them's a tween, who I have a feeling would be very interested in joining with you guys at some point. When we get our national program, it is usually a history kind of story. We've done, oh, I love the year when we did George Washington's, his boyhood and how it helped shape his character. So we were learning about the laws of civility. And at the same time that we learn those things, then we are expected to hopefully present to SARs and DARs. So hopefully we can meet in person and get something done this year, because last year we did very little other than actually survive. Apparently, state of California lost several of its SAR societies during the pandemic. So at least we are still functioning. We still have a budget, and we're hopeful for the future. And if you have any questions about the CAR, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Judy, I think it's wonderful what you're doing.
Judy, can I ask you a question? What is
Hey.
what is the theme of the CAR this year, and do you have a pin to sell?
We don't have it yet. We won't have it until they have their national convention thing here in, well, actually, it's coming up in the next couple of weeks. So we'll find out what the program is for this year.
Okay, cool. Because I always like to buy the pin.
They have wonderful pins, don't they?
Yeah.
Judy, I don't want to speak for our color guard commander, but some of our activities have changed slightly, and there's a possibility we might be able to support your event.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
We'll
We still have time. We still
Actually,
have
it's
time.
more than a possibility. We are going to support your event.
Oh, how wonderful. And guess what? We are having, it'll be a 3:00 in the afternoon meeting. And we had to change our venue. So we're at the San Marcos Historical Society at Walnut Grove Park in San Marcos. But I am planning, we are going to have, actually it's Kentucky Fried Chicken in a box. So you can, after the meeting, you can have your dinner in the park. That would be wonderful if you would show up. I'd be so excited. And so would the kids.
Wonderful.
And what is the date on that, April?
May 16th, Sunday, May 16th. Would you like to come and sing? You can lead the Star Spangled Banner for us.
Oh, see, you got me crying now.
Oh.
Let me, here's
You
my
can-
email. Here's my email. It's my email is pjc Posey, Posey at AOL.com.
All righty. I'll check with you and see if you're free.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I don't know if Jim Klingler is here. He usually is able to attend our meetings. Jim, are you here? I can't see on our panel.
I saw him on here.
Okay.
He may be muted.
Oh, I don't see him on here.
Yeah, I guess he isn't able to attend today. Okay. With that, today our guest speaker is noted author Charles Frye from the Redlands chapter. For those of you who attended our February meeting, you will recall that Charlie discussed how the British reconnoitered in and around the Boston area. In a few moments, he will talk to us about a little-known patriot, Paul Dudley Sargent, and his participation in the Siege of Boston. Welcome, Charlie.
Thank you, Barry. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here.
Yeah, let's hold off for 1 second if you don't mind.
Okay, no problem.
One more thing to go over, and that is our April history lesson for the month. So on the 1st of April in 1775, the New York Assembly passed its final Militia Act as a colony, requiring that all males 16 to 50 years of age to enlist under penalty of fine. So there's our first conscription of us as a nation. On April 3rd in 1776, the Continental Congress gave privateers permission to, quote, by force of arms, attack, subdue, and take all ships and other vessels belonging to the inhabitants of Great Britain. So we became pirates, as it were, which was a very good thing. It helped us quite a bit in obtaining ships to help fight the war. On the 6th, also in 1776, Congress resolved to allow exports from the colonies to any part of the world that was not under British rule. They also voted to allow the importation of goods, except those grown, produced, or shipped from any country under the King's rule. And then the following day, on the 7th of April in 1776, Captain John Barry, commander of the sloop of war Lexington, made the first U.S. Navy capture of a British warship, the sloop Edward, under battle conditions. One more day after that, on the 8th, John Adams arrived in Paris to replace Silas Deane as a member of the commission representing the interests of the United States in France. Lee believes that Deane is misappropriating French funds. Later, it was discovered that Deane is also passing information along to the British, so that was not a good thing. Also, in 1780, the British commenced an attack on Charleston, South Carolina. The British commander, General Henry Clinton, began what is termed the one solid British triumph of the war. The bold move was intended to subjugate the South from Georgia to the Chesapeake. Unfortunately, it didn't end well. On the 15th in 1783, Congress ratified the preliminary peace treaty signed in November of 1782. And on the 17th, in 1783 also, Spanish soldiers defeated the attacking British partisans at Fort Carlos, which is in present-day Arkansas Post-National Memorial, during what was called Colbert's Raid or Colbert's Raid, the only Revolutionary War action in Arkansas. And finally, on April 17th in 1775, Dr. Samuel Prescott reached Georgia with a message that the British were coming. That allows the militia to remove or destroy supplies and prepare to fight. Postwriter Israel Bissell began his ride through the colonies to deliver the news to Lexington. An unordered shot around the world began the American Revolution. So that all happened in this month. British forces retreated from Lexington back to Boston and were harassed and shot at all along the way by farmers and rebels. News of the events at Lexington Concord spread like wildfire throughout the colonies. It was a great, great day. So that's our history for the month. You're going to be tested later. Okay, now I would like to introduce compatriot Charlie Frye, who is a cartographer, information scientist, and U.S. Army veteran. His interests include genealogy, the history of the American Revolutionary War, and Major League Baseball. And Charlie, we'll talk later about the MLB's decision about the All-Star game. As he learned of Isaac Frye's story, he applied his skills to design an approach designed an approach to geographic information systems to organize and document historical research projects. Applying this approach to his Isaac Frye's story yielded a wealth of information that could be organized in many ways. This supplied the sketch for The War That Has Begun, the first of his 4 books in the Duty and the Call of Liberty series. As I said before, compatriot Frye is a member of the Redlands chapter. And Charlie, we welcome you, and take it away.
All right.
Thank you,
Barry. So I will share my screen, and actually I'm glad that you had some of these items on the, let's see here. Here we go. On your dates, because the parallels are, I think, pretty good with Paul Dudley Sargent. So let me see here. Can everybody see my screen here? I'm starting to move this up.
There it is. Yes.
Oh, there it is. Yay.
All right. So I'm going to move this out of the way. So Paul Dudley Sargent is a figure that most of us have not likely heard of. And I found that as I was learning about the American Revolution and my Patriot ancestor, that he played a role that was pretty pivotal to me having a Patriot ancestor. A bit of that. But although one thing I like, added the SAR logo, and it looks a lot better on a presentation like this than the old one does. So I'm happy about that too. So in my family's oral history, my ancestor, Isaac Frye, wasn't even thought of as a Minuteman. He was actually brevetted a major by the end of the war. And there's a road that runs by his house now called Major Isaac Frye Highway. And the family had always told me and shared through the generations that when he got the alarm for the Lexington and Concord encroachment of the British, he told his wife, Elizabeth, that the war has begun and I must be going. And as I was starting to write my first book, I wanted to start with that scene. And I got to thinking about, well, wait a second, how did he know a war was beginning? This was the day, the morning before. And he's saying this to his wife at about the time the first shots were being fired. And it's a curious thing. And as I dug into the reasons he would have thought a war was going to start on the day that the alarm would reach him, I came across an interesting story about Paul Dudley Sargent. So first of all, though, the story about Paul Dudley Sargent is contradictory to what I learned initially about particularly the New Hampshire regiments and how they were organized into the Continental Army in 1775 and then in 1776. And most school kids in New Hampshire learned that John Stark, Enoch Poor, and James Reed were the commanders of the New Hampshire regiments that were in the siege of Boston and then fought in the continental engagements in the following years. However, this omits some interesting facts that have to do with my ancestor, becoming an officer and undoubtedly taking an active interest in the cause. So this is a little bit difficult to read. I tried to make it as large as I could, but this is an extract from Abiel Abbott Livermore's History of Wilton, New Hampshire, which is a extensive volume that I've depended on quite a bit in my research, as it also has the genealogy for everybody who was living in Wilton in the latter part of the 19th century. And I've highlighted a couple of sections that mention commanders, and in particular, this list is chronological. And initially, it's mentioning Colonel Sargent several times as being a commander of a regiment. And then in June, we're now talking about Colonel Reed's regiment. And early on, I didn't know what to make of that. And because I'd always, all the records of my ancestor being in the Continental Army point to Colonel James Reed. And so this was something that, didn't come off as something intuitive to understand until I did a little more research. And so I wanted to find out who this Colonel Sargent was. So it turns out that one of his, I think it was one of his sons or grandsons, produced a biography of Paul Dudley Sargent. And he is as ardent a patriot as one could imagine. He is a well-to-do merchant of the same sort that, say, John Hancock was in Boston, and he was based in Gloucester, Massachusetts originally. And he was active in the Sons of Liberty, and there's something that that is important about that. At that time, the Sons of Liberty was not a small organization. Literally tens of thousands of people belonged, and they would have large meetings going into the beginning of the Revolution, as the British government passed various of the acts that were either deemed intolerable or otherwise objectionable. And Sargent in particular had some expertise about organizing militias, and he was vocal about that. And so the Sons of Liberty gave him the task of figuring out how to best organize the militias. And he initially went back in 1772 and organized a militia in Gloucester, Massachusetts. And something I've learned about those men, and it was not just Gloucester, but it was Cape Ann and a few of the surrounding towns. They figured very prominently in the Battle of Breed's Hill. A large portion of the men from those towns fought actively, were in Colonel Prescott's regiment that was in the center of that battle. And so it's not an accident that those men were front and center. And Paul Dudley Sargent, I think, has quite a lot to do with their preparedness. Then, as he's doing this, my sense was, and I'm reading into one of the lines that was written into this biography, is that he had become obnoxious to the Massachusetts government within a year or so, and particularly to the governor. And so he left the state to avoid the headaches of that kind of attention, and he moved to Amherst, New Hampshire. Amherst is still a small town. It's in the middle of Hillsborough County, which is there's 3 counties that are on the southern edge of New Hampshire, and Hillsborough is the one in the middle. And he began organizing the militia in Hillsborough County. And that's where the parallel with my Patriot ancestor picks up, which is my ancestors in Wilton, New Hampshire, which is about a half-day walk south of Amherst. And Amherst is the county seat. So there's I think some advantages for Sargent being there, both that it's remote enough from the Massachusetts government, yet central enough from an economic standpoint that he can still make a living and continue with his livelihood. And there are a number of, I think, good sources that I hadn't been aware of until I kind of looked through them, not for my own ancestor, but for mentions of Paul Dudley Sargent. Wilton it became well known in the colonies in 1773. They had attempted to raise a new meeting house, and as the cover of the book shows, it didn't go very well. They had a large beam of we'll call it inferior quality, or that was supported by a post of inferior quality. And as a number of the men, and I think there were 19 of the men who were up on the second story when the beam burst, and the men, their tools and everything collapsed on them. I think it was 4 men who were killed within the space of that day. My ancestor was wounded, so to speak. He was injured by something, although his injury wasn't described, but it did have an impact. And I should go back on one point there. And the impact was that apparently he didn't do much farming in 1774. And he was, the New Hampshire Archives has the court records from the colonial times, and my ancestor was sued by a number of people, including his brothers-in-law and Paul Dudley Sargent. And so the reason somebody would get sued was for non-payment, and the reason you wouldn't be able to pay is you weren't able to work. And so I was beginning to see that this event had a direct bearing on my ancestor, and ultimately how he, I think, became involved in the army in the militia as a Minuteman. So there's some other things that lead up to all of this, and this kind of gets back to some of those earlier points that Barry made in the dates. So Parliament in 1774 passed what we called the Coercive Acts, and they also established formal military rule over Massachusetts Bay Colony. So this resulted in the closure of the port of Boston and essentially shutting down the economy in New England. In July of 1774, New Hampshire's first provincial Congress meets, and they're beginning to get organized. And among the things that they did is they selected delegates that would attend the first Continental Congress in 1774 in October. And this begins to turn some lights on for me from the standpoint of, the idea of knowing that a war is going to begin for my ancestor actually has much deeper roots. And the consensus of those roots then is expressed by this a number of decrees or dictates from the First Continental Congress, in that first of all is that as British citizens living in colonies, they do have the same rights as British citizens in England. And on December 1st, they also initiated a boycott of all British commerce and goods. So I find that this is kind of an interesting thing in the sense that it was good for us in 1774, and yet if you look at the United States history with respect to its initial foray into colonization of the Philippines, they decided exactly the opposite and made sure the Philippine citizens were no longer, were not going to have the same rights as the citizens living in the United States. Early in 1775, based on the Continental Congress meeting and giving its dictates, the New Hampshire has a Congress of its own, and it meets and essentially absorbs all of the resolves of the first Continental Congress, and then there was a series of town and county meetings afterwards, and they were all getting to this idea of a militia being needed and that martial skills and military arts needed to be first rate at this point. And so town meetings have occurred. The idea of this Wilton meeting is that saying that we're going to pay for 25 Minutemen, and that's going to have 2 sergeants and 2 lieutenants with it as well. And my ancestor was one of those 2 lieutenants. And then this goes a little further, and it begins to involve Sargent, because he's actually one of the leaders in the Hillsborough County Congress. And what happens in that Congress is that they resolve that Sargent is going to lead the men in these militias from the southern part of Hillsborough County, and John Stark, who is very well known as New Hampshire's leading contributor as a general in the American Revolution, would be leading the men from the northern towns in Hillsborough County. And then that's essentially saying that they know they have more than one regiment of men, and they're going to divide it up roughly equally, knowing that there's up between 300 and 500 men for each of Sargent and Stark to command. So if we take all of that and kind of look back on the idea of how did they know there was going to be a war, the idea is pretty straightforward, and it gets to the premise of why they are brushing up on and getting their military skills and people organized, is that they're not going to just be defending their homes and their land as they normally would have been with a militia. And then there is a specific reason, which is that New Hampshire has agreed to support Massachusetts if called. And support meant armed confrontation with ministerial troops. And one of the things I've learned over the years is the way that people spoke about their political or economic leanings at that time. And Tories in particular would have been saying that they were supporters of the government. However, in New England, Tories were the minority, and the government for many people was the enemy because it was curtailing their economy and their freedoms. And in supporting the idea of Massachusetts needing help, that meant a confrontation with troops, and there was no intention to back down, and that meant in all likelihood there would be a battle, and there obviously was. And then a battle would be war. So this was common sense, I think, to anybody who was involved in these town meetings and congresses, particularly in the first few weeks of April of 1775. So the alarm, which was carried by, most famously by Paul Revere, but also William Dawes and then Samuel Prescott, spread far and wide, and even by 2 a.m. The southern tier of New Hampshire had begun to receive the alarm, particularly as you went up the Merrimack River. A number of the towns were already mobilizing in the wee hours of the morning, and Wilton probably got that alarm probably a few hours later, somewhere between 5 and 7 a.m. So that's and now for me that was like, okay, now I know more of a setting for my ancestor receiving that alarm. And then most of the southern tier of Hillsborough County and Rockingham County, New Hampshire, which was the easternmost county, marched that day, and many of them arrived in Concord that evening, and then made their way to Medford, which is a town immediately to the north and west of Boston on the next day. So Paul Dudley Sargent leads one of these regiments. He reaches the southern border of New Hampshire, he has under his command 4 or 5 companies. So he's got a regiment-sized body of troops with him. So he's very much in the role of a colonel in charge of a regiment, which was the typical military arrangement. However, beyond the first couple of days of the alarm, things begin to get confused, and it's partly because New England is a relatively small area with multiple governments. New Hampshire is its own colony. It has a government that's seated in Exeter, New Hampshire, and they immediately call a Congress to figure out what they're doing because their militias just marched. And at this point, there's not even a plan to support them with any kind of organized way of how do you feed 2,000 men who have now marched a day to the south, and how's this going to work out if we're going to achieve the objectives of supporting Massachusetts, and what does that mean now that they've marched and that there's been a battle? And it was a confusing time, to say the least. That initial meeting of what was ultimately going to be the state of New Hampshire's House of Representatives did vote to elect a general, and Nathaniel Folsom was that general. He was probably better known as an administrator and a facilitator. He was not a military mind, and he certainly was not the sort who was going to compete with John Stark in terms of tactics and capabilities. Stark was a well-known adherent of the Rogers Rangers School of irregular warfare, and had served as such in the French and Indian War and in subsequent campaigns. And then things got confusing as well. There was a fellow named Samuel Dudley, a New Hampshire resident, but a Tory, and he actually walked into the New Hampshire part of the camp and stood up and told the troops there that General Ward, who was in charge of the Massachusetts men, and said, "You're no longer needed. You can go home." And 600 men did go home that day. So in the meantime, Sargent had gone to Exeter to participate in that first Congress, and he came back pretty quickly, and maybe prematurely, as we'll see. While he is there, though, John Stark is voted by a show of hands to be in command of the New Hampshire troops rather than Nathaniel Folsom, who's not there. So essentially, we have 2 separate organizations occurring under the same heading of New Hampshire, but they know nothing about each other, in the sense that the left hand and the right hand are not part of the same body knowingly. By the time a week passes, another figure emerges, which is that of James Reed. He's from Fitzwilliam, New Hampshire, just a little further to the west of Wilton in Hillsborough County. And Reed is also somebody with some military experience and a lot of respect. He's a very I'm going to say direct, plain-spoken sort of man who gets things done, and that respect translates into some acclamation for companies to be formed underneath him as well. And by the end of this week, the arrangements in the camps around Boston are that there are 18 companies of New Hampshire men, 14 of which have put themselves under John Stark, and then I should say not 18, but 22, and then 4 are under each of Sargent and Reed. And they know that's disproportionate, but so my ancestor for that time, based on those records, was obviously in Sargent's regiment, and I think that made sense. And I should go back to those court records from the standpoint that of all those people who sued my ancestor, the only one who did not follow through and collect was Paul Dudley Sargent. He had sued my ancestor 3 separate times, and under none of those times did he collect. And I suspect he used that as leverage to get my ancestor more involved in the cause, from the standpoint that if you can't pay your bills, can you at least serve in the militia and help my cause out? And I think he more than likely traded the honor of taking care of his debt in some fashion for helping Sargent out, as my ancestor ultimately became the quartermaster of Sargent's regiment. And those records show what he was doing from a transactional basis to gain supplies for Sargent's regiment. So food and funding end up being a central problem for all of the troops surrounding Boston in the first week or so, with regard to how do you lay siege to a town the size of Boston with 20,000 men. The New Hampshire's Provincial Congress essentially started a rotation of towns sending supplies by the wagon load. And volunteers had seen this need early on and had begun doing it even on the first day. But they needed everything, from the standpoint that these men were, there, but they didn't have much. Certainly no more food than for 2 or 3 days, and no tents, no buildings. It was very much a chaotic camp. By the middle of, so that's kind of the pressing concern for these legislatures, rather than putting people in command. There's some interesting things about then how are we going to fund this question? The New Hampshire Provincial Congress actually went so far as to realize that they weren't a wealthy state, and it was going to take people individually stepping up to back what was going to happen. So they approved for 2,000 men. And they also made an appropriation from the standpoint that they were agreeing to take on the debt of funding the army. And when I say they were agreeing to take on the debt, I literally mean that the representatives on the floor of that body agreed to be the bondsmen. And it was a sum of 10,000 pounds of lawful money. Today, that is closer to the idea of maybe $300,000 to $500,000. So, imagine, essentially townspeople willing to have that debt backed. Once that question was answered, the question of who is going to be in charge of this military operation becomes most relevant. And interestingly, the first commander who was appointed by New Hampshire's government was a man named Enoch Poor, who wasn't even there. So again, we still have the idea of the New Hampshire troops and the New Hampshire government not being in close enough contact, even though they were, a one-day ride apart, being able to organize themselves. And nobody from the legislature had gone down to the camp, and only Sargent, from what I can see, is the only one from the camp who had gone up to be part of the legislature. And at the end of May, that did change, however, and the legislature begins to send people down to the camp. And what happens is that there was a notice of Sargent having secured 3 commissions for colonels in the Massachusetts arrangement, which makes sense given who Sargent was, because he was a Massachusetts resident who had recently moved to New Hampshire. So he still had all the contacts and the leverage to secure part of the organization, although it was with the clause that until the state of New Hampshire agrees to how many commissions they're going to provide. And nobody has a record of whether it was going to be 3 or 4 commissions, but it ended up being 3, and then this begins to leave Sargent out, and officially does on June 3rd. And so Sargent ends up securing a commission to be in the Massachusetts arrangement, and effectively becomes a Massachusetts officer, even though his recent home is in New Hampshire. To think about what happened, adding all of this up together, is that they're trying to make sense of and organize an effort where nobody's being paid, although most of them were under an arrangement similar to how Wilton, New Hampshire did things, which is to say that we're willing to fund a certain number of people for a certain duration, and that was, I think, generally understood to be measured in weeks, not months or years. And then 20,000 men respond to the in countryside immediately around Boston, and there's no essentially no toilets, no barracks, and very little discipline. So it's a pretty wild scene by military standards, to say the least. My ancestor, being a quartermaster and a quartermaster under sergeant, had to be responsible for obvious things such as digging latrines and so on early on. And even a lot of these histories neglect the fact that George Washington is still being ratified as the commander of the Continental Army, and he's not there yet. So so General Ward is very much in charge, and New Hampshire is very much in charge of its own troops and trying to figure out how they're going to organize this. So with Sargent having his own regiment, that was the 27th Massachusetts Regiment, and they participated in the coming year and a half, both at the Battle of Bunker Hill and the Battle of Long Island. Sargent gained a little bit of historical confusion for a long time because he was noted and claimed to have been wounded during the Battle of Bunker Hill. However, as people have dug into this, in particular, J.L. Bell, who writes the Boston 1775 blog, is an excellent historian from the Boston area, took a look at this and it looked at the same biography. The clipping of the sketch of Sargent's portrait is the same one from that biography. And he was able to ascertain that Sargent still had 4 companies at that time, and they were sent to Leechmere Point, which was on the northern banks of the Charles River, immediately to the south of Charleston and the battle. And they were there to guard against a second British landing, which would have allowed for a pretty open path to the American headquarters in Cambridge, or to cut off the retreat from Charlestown. So this was definitely part of the battle, but it was also not in a great deal of danger, although the British gondolas, who were in what they called the back bay then, when it actually had water, were firing into and at these troops that Sargent was commanding. And there were somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 men. Sergeants were 200 of them. And Sargent is grazed by a cannonball, and that is the cause of this wound that he had claimed. And it's quite plausible. And there were other accounts that corroborated Sargent's claim. So it was just interesting because Sargent's troops didn't end up in the battle, although it ends up being quite confusing later. And again, back to revisionist history, is that three of the companies that were added to Sargent's regiment were added in late July. They were actually from Stark, and they fought in the battle under Stark on the front line. And so if you look at the Massachusetts rolls, those men are under Sargent and are taking fairly heavy casualties during the battle. In fact, one of the Redlands chapter members, Melvin Harrell's ancestor, was in one of these companies and was wounded during the battle. And so it's confusing as to whether he was, whose regiment he was in. And it wasn't until I later found a roll of the food that was being provided to the troops, in particular for Stark, it was to see that the New Hampshire food was being given to those 3 companies up through July. And so that's ultimately the basis for why they were in Stark's regiment. So in many ways, the politics of Sargent's history in Massachusetts, and whether he was really a person who was loyal to and would obey the New Hampshire provincial government's dictates, was in question. And the acceptance of the Massachusetts commissions, given the poor communication, essentially left a door open, particularly for Enoch Poor to become a colonel, and being the first colonel that was actually appointed. Was quite I think quite a surprise for Sargent, to say the least. And I thought it was unfortunate, given how much effort he had put into organizing the militia and essentially taking personal responsibility for ensuring the preparation of Hillsborough County, New Hampshire, as they responded to the alarm. He served through the end of 1776, but he fell ill, and ill enough that he had to resign his commission. And so he goes home at the end of 1776, but as soon as he recovers, he shifts to the role of a privateer, given his ownership of ships and so on. He actually had a very good basis to become a privateer in the war, and continued to do that quite successfully. And then he ultimately moves to Sullivan, Maine, and he dies there in 1828. So he's, and it's been interesting because his family's got the reputation of being fairly prickly about his war service. And for everything I've investigated, there's no claim that he's made that is false, and he is certainly underappreciated in the same way that say William Dawes or Samuel Prescott is relative to the alarm of April 19th. And then I wanted to add a little bit about my books. I'm currently writing the third book in the Duty and the Cause of Liberty series, and the first book in particular, a lot of this Paul Dudley Sargent research was underpinning the early chapters in this book, and I definitely cover that in more detail than I do in here in this presentation. And those books are all available on Amazon. And then last, I wanted to include a little bit about where I got the name Duty and the Cause of Liberty. It's actually something that my ancestor's wife, Elizabeth, writes. She's writing to him later in 1776. The 3rd New Hampshire Regiment under James Reed is now at in the Fort Ticonderoga vicinity. They're right across the lake in what was called Camp Independence. And she's starting to realize that this war is going to be a lot longer. And the context that she's writing this in is that she doesn't desire that he should neglect his duty, but if the the country in general is not behindhand, as she writes it in the Cause of Liberty, she wants his company at home rather than off in the army. And so and is asking whether he expects a discharge in the context of this. But I thought it was interesting to be able to take that way of thinking about things, and what I ultimately had found out is that somebody had already co-opted the Cause of Liberty as a series title for a Civil War series, and so I needed to use something that was not the same, just so I didn't infringe on that. And so I could take a little bit more of what Elizabeth wrote and turn it into something that very aptly encompasses Isaac Frye's service through the war, because he did his duty for over 9 years in the War of the Revolution, and this summed it up quite well. So with that, I am happy to take any questions or hear any comments and observations that you might have. And I think it's maybe easier to stop sharing the screen here.
Okay. Thank you, Charlie. Any questions for Charlie on this one? It's a great story.
Very nice, Charlie.
Charlie, I've got one question for you. Towards the end there, you said that the family is a bit prickly about his service, and however, you've seen nothing to really warrant that kind of behavior. Do you know why they're so prickly about it?
I think it has more to do with the fact that we have the internet today as a basis to find everything out about somebody's service, and up until the 1980s, it depended on where you went and what you found. And so there were, there obviously there are letters who, Sargent had one bad mark on his record near the end of 1776, which is that some of the officers in his regiment on Long Island had been caught looting some of the homes. That's not Sargent's fault. This was just people not doing what they were supposed to be doing, and the officers were arrested and tried for that. So it's when you find those kinds of things, they reflect on the commander. And if you find them independently of anything else, and given the relative depth at which the other records of Sargent and his contributions are buried, and that's the kind of thing that leads to that prickliness.
Thank you.
It's a wonderful story, very well told by you, Charlie.
Thank you. Yeah, I've enjoyed finding it. It's quite a, it's just one of those things that, for me, it explains so much about where my ancestors' inclinations came from.
Do you have a particular source for genealogy?
Yes.
It has shifted over the years. I have, for many years, I depended on the published genealogy. So, for instance, the New England Genealogical Society's books that they produced were excellent sources. And I still use a lot of the town histories, because they not only give genealogies, but they also give some sketches. But lately, the FamilySearch.org tools have become, I think, preeminent in their ability to, and I use them to research my books, in the sense that I literally research every patriot with a speaking part and learn their family's history. And I'm able to do that consistently within there. So, just finding out how old they are, whether they were married, and so on.
Hey, Charlie, Charlie, on the point about the tools that you're using, do you find Fold 3 has anything valuable for you?
Oh, absolutely. Fold 3 has been a gold mine for particularly the rolls and the pensions. The rolls have allowed me to write history that hasn't been written before, in the sense that when you start to look at things at a very detailed level from inside of a regiment or a company, the rolls are the best way to describe what's happening to the people in the company. And then the pensions actually allowed me to prove where my ancestor was in some cases, because the men who were giving their affidavits to get the pensions would describe their change of commands and the locations that they were at during the war. And in particular, that there was no roll of any of the New Hampshire men being at Yorktown, but there were 5 companies of New Hampshire men who were under the light infantry under Lafayette and Alexander Scammell, and neither of them actually produced the roll that survived. And it was only through those affidavits of saying they were under those commanders that I could find, who was. I've been slowly accumulating a list of who was in each of those regiments, just because there is not one, and people who today, would like to know that kind of service, because it is so well documented otherwise in terms of the role they played militarily. It'd be nice to know if your Patriot ancestor was in that unit.
Thank you. Any other questions for Charlie? Charlie, thank you so much. This has been great. I learned a lot, and I hope you all did as well. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. And we'll see you again on another of your riveting speech or talks in the near future. Okay, let me share my screen again. Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
All right, great. Okay, so I've got some announcements to make. The first one, here we go, is an update on some of our youth awards. Last month, we announced Cadet Master Sergeant Jessica Pham of the Scripps Ranch High School Air Force ROTC unit as our chapter winner of the JROTC Enhanced JROTC program. Since that time, we learned that Cadet Pham received a huge promotion. She now leads the entire CA 935 unit at Scripps Ranch as a cadet colonel. That's just beyond what I could imagine, going from a master sergeant up to a colonel in one big fell swoop. Unfortunately, we didn't find out about this unusual promotion until after the state JROTC committee had chosen this year's winner. If we had, this announcement certainly would have played heavily in her favor. So as a consolation, we will award Cadet Pham with a Good Citizenship Medal along with her JROTC medal and certificate later this month. Also, even bigger news is that last month we announced the chapter winner of the Sea Cadet Outstanding Citizenship Award as Miguel Harris Barlasan. I am pleased to report that Cadet Petty Officer Second Class Barlasan is the very first place winner in the California Society Cadet of the Year Award. He will be formally announced at the upcoming SAR annual meeting that's being held next week. So Cadet Barlasan took home another $1,000 scholarship for his achievement at the state level and now goes on to compete at the national level. So let's please wish him luck.
And also wish Philip Henshaw well.
Yes. I'm pleased to announce that our own former Color Guard commander, Skip Cox, has recently been appointed to the National Education Committee. He is a graduate of the School of Business at LSU. He continued to serve LSU as a distinguished faculty advisor. He was CEO of Cox Financial Advisors, which did estate planning and consulting for the Louisiana and Texas Automobile Dealers Association. More importantly, though, he is a history buff, particularly the American Civil War, where he has portrayed Lieutenant General James Longstreet in reenactments and speaking on the Battle of Gettysburg. He is a member of the Charles M. Russell Museum in Great Falls, Montana, and the National Society of Sons of the American Revolution, obviously, the Civil War Trust, and the National Museum of the Civil War Soldier in Petersburg. Skip, you may not know, is an avid fly fisherman and writer, having authored several fly fishing articles published locally, nationally, and internationally. When you see Skip, please congratulate him on this well-earned position and give him all of your feedback on what we should be doing with our educational programs. He is one of the best advocates that I know of for our education things at the national level. So Skip, congratulations. I know you joined us today. I also want to announce that we are working towards participating in the USS Stark Memorial Award. Recently, we've discovered that Marine PFC John F. Middleswart has become the 300th USS Oklahoma unknown to be identified by the Defense Department POW/MIA accounting agency. This was done through DNA. And he will be buried here in San Diego, which is his hometown. Services are scheduled for June 8th, and we are looking to participate as a color guard unit, as an honor guard in that event. Hopefully we will be able to announce more information on that soon, and if you can make that event, that would be wonderful. Okay. I also want to announce that on Memorial Day, our chapter is hosting a national event to pay tribute to our nation's fallen servicemen and women. Several chapters across the country have sponsored events like this to remember things like the Battle of Morris Creek Bridge, the Battle of Kettle Creek, and others. Events like this have well over 300 attendees from across the country participating, so we will be using Zoom. and YouTube live streaming to accommodate everyone who wants to participate and watch. Some are recorded prior to the event because the locations are somewhat, or where some of the activities place. We can't do them all live. For
Barry?
instance, yes, sir.
Is that posted on our website as an event?
Yes, the Memorial Day tribute is posted as an event.
Great, thank you.
So as an example, because some of these places, these events for our event, some events, Philip Hinshaw, who is a former crew member, will lay a wreath on the USS Midway. Wreaths will be laid at Mount Soledad, National Veterans Memorial, Liberty Station, Naval Bases Coronado, and Point Loma. Our color guard is supporting each of these activities, and musket volleys are planned at select locations. As I just mentioned, that there is this information on the events page. We are working on releasing the actual registration by Monday morning. So please register by May 15th to ensure your spot, as seating may be limited on Zoom. If you'd like to get a better feel for what this event is like, you can watch the Battle of Moores Creek Bridge wreath laying event, and a link is available in the chapter's website under the events tab. I hope you all can make that. It will be a very well-attended event. As a reminder, the National Society of Sons of the American Revolution is proceeding with holding its 131st Annual Congress in Washington. Again, this is a face-to-face meeting, barring any orders from the Washington government or health department.
Barry, may I interject for a moment?
Sure.
Paula, on the memorial service, the car is definitely invited to attend and participate.
The CAR, that's not
Yes.
mine. That's
That's Judy's.
That's Judy. I'm sorry, Judy. But
Yes,
you are.
my problem is I have brand new active members, and I'm getting some reluctance as far as putting anything together on a video.
All right.
Understood.
I perfectly understand that. All right. Thank you, though. But you are invited.
Thank you very much. I know Barry already invited us.
Okay.
Paula, Joe, you're invited too.
Thank
Yes.
you. Yay.
Yay.
Okay. So again, the fall Board of Managers meeting will be in Riverside this year. Hopefully, many of you can attend. If you've never been to the Mission Inn in Riverside, it's a wonderful place to have a meeting and stay. So some upcoming events. We are holding our regular chapter board meeting at its regular time this Thursday on April 15th at 7 via Zoom. All members are invited. Please see the events page on our website for registration links. We will have our last chapter meeting before the summer break on May 15th. And I hope this is our last mandatory virtual meeting so we can resume in-person meetings starting in August. In any case, we will continue to present the meetings live on Zoom and on the San Diego chapter YouTube channel for anyone who can't make a physical meeting. Again, on Memorial Day, May 31st, we're hosting the tribute of wreath laying ceremony via Zoom and YouTube. And it looks as though we might be on the road to some type of normalcy as the Coronado Independence Day Parade looks like it's going to be held in some form or fashion.
Yay.
We don't quite know what that format is yet, but the chapter does plan to participate in any way we can. We expect to have our dignitaries and others riding in Mustang convertibles, courtesy of the San Diego Mustang Club, which compatriot Fred Hall has been able to get to work with us. And we'll keep you posted on how we proceed as we get closer to the event. Also on Independence Day weekend, we will be partnering with several of the Balboa Park International Colleges. As always, we will be at the House of Spain, and we look forward to working with others such as the House of the USA. For an event like this, we need volunteers to spend a few hours to visitors explaining what the Sons of the American Revolution is all about and the work we do in the community. So please see Philip for the House of Spain and see Duncan for the House of the USA and others. And then on August 21st, we will come back from our summer break and have hopefully our in-person meeting.
Yeah.
We're looking at some different, potentially more cost-effective and centralized locations versus the Bernardo Heights Country Club. And we'll let you know where as soon as we can. Okay. So any questions on upcoming events?
Barry, I just really enjoy the history at the very beginning of the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Dick. Okay, so
Barry, did you want me to present the flag?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I completely forgot about that. Let me stop sharing and I'll let you share.
Actually, just put me up on the screen, Barry.
I don't know how to do that.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, let me stop. Okay, let me talk and then let's see if we can't get a presenter. Okay.
Okay, yeah, just share.
Turn off your sharing.
I did.
Okay, we have blank screen up there now.
Stop sharing. There we go.
Okay, let's see. Let's see, am I on now? No,
Yes.
we're still looking at you, Barry. Oh.
You're in the
Almost.
gallery, but we can see you, and you
Okay.
will light up when you speak.
All right. Well, the short, I am a new dual member of the Oaks chapter of the Michigan Society, and their meetings are being held by Zoom. So I attended my first meeting, and at that first meeting, the Michigan Society had purchased centennial flags for all their chapters. And I was there, and the state president was also there. And he said, I've got some extra flags. So he asked if our chapter would like one. And I said, yes. So we have now got a additional flag, and here it is.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah.
This is it for the bicentennial. And so now we have 5 flags, and as you can see, it's got we have the fringe put on it, and we have the new flagpole, which the chapter had approved the purchase of. So just wanted to make the announcement that this is now here.
Great, looks good.
Wonderful.
Nice job, Duncan.
Beautiful.
Okay. Let me reshare my screen. Okay. So in closing, I would ask you to all stand, and I will recite the benediction. The peace of God, which passes all understanding, keep your hearts and minds in the knowledge and love of God, and the blessings of God Almighty be amongst you and remain with you always. Amen.
Amen.
Patriot Hall, can you lead us in the recessional, please? He must have stepped out. So I will lead it. Until we meet again, let us remember our obligation
To our forefathers,
Our brothers who gave us our Constitution, the
Bill
Bill
of
of Rights,
Rights,
and
and
independence
the
of the
Supreme
court,
Court,
and a nation of free
and
men.
a nation of free men.
Color Guard, would you please retrieve the colors?
Hutchin, hut. Forward, march. Mark time, march. Color guard, halt. Right, face. Retrieve the colors. Attend, cut. About, face. Mark time, march. Forward, march. Color guard, halt. To your post.
Okay, this concludes our today's meeting. Thank you all for attending, and I look forward to seeing you again next month for our Zoom meeting on May 15th.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank
You
you
too.
and have a good weekend, everybody.
Okay,
Blessings
thank
to you
you.
all. I love you guys. Bye.
Great talk.
Bye.
Hi, Will.
Hi.
Hi, Phil. Hi, Ernie.
Hi.
Hello, Will. Greetings. Glad to see you.
Good to see you, Ernie. Hi, Phil.
Everyone take care, be safe.
You
Okay.
too, Wes.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so
Wes.
much for coming.
Yep.
Thank you, John.
Tish, oh.